Sometimes the heaviest things we carry are not in our hands, but in our minds. Old memories, past mistakes, words that hurt us years ago. We hold on to them so tightly that we forget we have the power to let them go. We believe time will heal everything, but time alone doesn't heal. What heals is the decision to stop holding on. This is the story of a man who learned a simple truth that most people ignore. You don't have to carry everything life gives you. Chapter 1. The Invisible Burden. Arjun's life looked perfectly normal from the outside. He woke up on time, went to work, completed his responsibilities, and returned home without much fuss. People described him as calm, disciplined, and dependable. He never complained, never caused trouble, and never stood out. But inside, Arjun carried a weight no one could see. It wasn't a physical burden. It didn't show on his face, but it was always there, quietly sitting in his mind, growing heavier with time. Every small mistake he had ever made replayed itself in his thoughts. A wrong decision from years ago, a moment when he said something he shouldn't have, a time he failed when he expected more from himself. These memories didn't just visit him once. They returned again and again, like echoes that refused to fade. Then there were the words. A teacher who once told him he wasn't good enough. A friend who left without explanation. A moment when someone laughed at his effort. Even though years had passed, those moments felt as real as if they had just happened. Arjun didn't talk about these things. He didn't share them with anyone. Instead, he held on to them silently, as if letting go would mean ignoring something important. At first, it didn't seem like a problem. He continued living his life, doing what was expected of him. But slowly, something began to change. He started feeling tired more often, not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but a deeper exhaustion that followed him everywhere. Even on quiet days, his mind was never at rest. When there was nothing to think about, his thoughts would return to the past. Again and again, even moments that should have felt peaceful were filled with noise. He could sit alone in silence, but inside his head there was always something replaying. A conversation he wished he could change, a mistake he wished he could undo, a version of himself he wished he had been. The more he thought about these things, the heavier they became. And yet he never questioned it. He believed this was normal, that everyone carried their past like this, that this constant mental weight was just a part of being human. But what Arjun didn't realize was this. He wasn't just remembering the past. He was holding on to it, tightly, every single day. Chapter 2. The Simple Demonstration. The visit to the village was not planned. Arjun had taken a short break from work, hoping a change of place might quiet his restless mind. The village felt slower, calmer, untouched by the constant noise he was used to. The air was lighter, the sounds softer, but inside him nothing had changed. He found his grandfather sitting outside the old house, as he always did, watching the world with quiet patience. There was no rush in his movements, no tension in his face, just stillness. Arjun sat beside him. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable, but it felt heavy to Arjun, as if his thoughts were louder in it. Eventually, he began to speak, not in a structured way, not with clear words, but with the weight he had been carrying for years. He spoke about stress, about feeling tired all the time, about how his mind never seemed to stop. He mentioned the past without going into details, as if even saying it out loud might make it more real. His grandfather listened quietly. He didn't interrupt, didn't advise, didn't react strongly. He simply listened. After Arjun finished, there was a pause. Instead of giving a long explanation or a piece of wisdom, his grandfather reached for a glass of water placed beside him and handed it over. "Hold this," he said calmly. Arjun looked confused, but he took the glass. It felt ordinary, light, nothing unusual. After a minute, his grandfather asked, "Is it heavy?" Arjun shook his head. "No, keep holding it." Arjun did as he was told. A few minutes passed. Nothing changed at first. The glass still felt light, just as it had before. But as time went on, his arm began to feel slightly uncomfortable. He adjusted his grip, trying to ease the strain. More time passed. The discomfort slowly turned into tension. His arm started to ache. The same glass, the same weight, but it no longer felt light. He tried to ignore it, but the pain grew stronger. His focus shifted completely to his arm. Everything else faded into the background. Finally, he couldn't hold it any longer. "Can I put it down?" he asked. His grandfather nodded. The moment Arjun placed the glass back on the ground, a wave of relief spread through his arm. The pain didn't disappear instantly, but it began to fade. His grandfather looked at him and asked softly, "What made it heavy?" Arjun thought for a moment, holding it for too long. The old man smiled gently. "The weight didn't change," he said, "but the longer you held it, the heavier it became." Arjun stayed silent. Something about those words felt familiar, but he hadn't fully understood it yet. His grandfather continued, his voice calm and steady. Your thoughts are the same. Pain, mistakes, memories, they are not always heavy in the beginning. But when you hold on to them for too long, they become a burden. The words settled slowly in Arjun's mind. For the first time, he didn't feel like someone was giving him advice. It felt like he was being shown something he had been doing without realizing. He looked at the glass again. It was just sitting there, harmless, light, exactly as it had been before. Nothing about it had changed. Only the way he held it had. And in that simple moment, something inside him began to shift. Chapter 2. The simple demonstration. The visit to the village was not meant to be anything special. Arjun had only come to get away for a while, hoping that distance might quiet the constant noise inside his mind. The village welcomed him with its slow rhythm, the soft rustle of trees, the distant sounds of cattle, and the kind of silence that felt alive instead of empty. He found his grandfather sitting on the old wooden bench outside the house, just as he remembered. There was something about the old man's presence that felt steady, almost unshakable, as if time moved around him but never disturbed him. Arjun sat beside him. For a while, neither of them spoke. The quiet stretched between them, and instead of bringing peace, it made Arjun more aware of the thoughts he had been carrying. They grew louder in the silence, pressing against him. Without planning to, he began to talk. At first, his words were simple, almost casual. He spoke about work, about feeling tired, about how nothing seemed to excite him anymore. But as he continued, the surface began to crack. The real weight came through. He spoke about the past without naming it directly, about mistakes he couldn't forget, about moments that kept replaying in his mind. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried something heavy. His grandfather listened without interruption. No judgment, no immediate advice, just quiet attention. It felt different from any conversation Arjun had before. When Arjun finished, the silence returned, but this time it felt lighter. Then, without saying anything, his grandfather reached for a glass of water placed nearby and handed it to him. Hold this, he said gently. Arjun looked at the glass for a moment, confused by the simplicity of the request. But he took it anyway. It felt light, almost weightless. After a short pause, his grandfather asked, "Is it heavy?" Arjun shook his head. "Not at all." "Keep holding it," the old man replied. Arjun did. At first, nothing changed. The glass remained light just as before. He almost wondered what the point of this was. A few minutes passed. Slowly, a faint strain began to appear in his arm. It wasn't painful yet, just noticeable. He shifted slightly, trying to adjust. More time passed. The strain grew stronger. What had once felt effortless now demanded attention. His arm began to ache, and his grip tightened without him realizing it. The longer he held the glass, the heavier it seemed to become. His focus narrowed completely to the discomfort. The simple act of holding it started to feel like effort. He looked at his grandfather, unsure how much longer he was expected to continue. Minutes later, the discomfort turned into pain. His arm felt tense, almost numb, and he could no longer ignore it. "Can I put it down?" he finally asked. His grandfather nodded. The moment Arjun lowered his hand and placed the glass on the ground, a deep sense of relief spread through his arm. The pain didn't vanish instantly, but it began to ease. His muscles slowly relaxed, and the tension faded. They both looked at the glass. It sat there quietly, unchanged. His grandfather broke the silence. "What made it heavy?" Arjun answered honestly. "Holding it for too long." The old man gave a gentle smile. "The weight never changed," he said, "but your experience of it did." Arjun stayed still, letting the words settle. His grandfather continued, his voice calm but clear. "Life gives everyone moments of pain, mistakes and memories. In the beginning, they are like this glass, light enough to carry. But when you hold on to them for hours, days, or even years, they become heavy." Arjun felt something shift inside him. The connection was becoming clearer. "You don't suffer because of what happened," his grandfather added softly. "You suffer because you keep holding on to it." Arjun looked down at his hand, still feeling the fading ache. For the first time, he understood that the pain he carried was not just from the past itself, but from his refusal to let it go. The glass rested on the ground, simple and harmless. Nothing about it had changed, only the way he held it had. And in that quiet realization, Arjun began to see his own life differently. Chapter 3. The Realization. That simple moment with the glass did not leave Arjun's mind. Even after the conversation ended, even after the day moved on, the feeling stayed with him. It wasn't loud or overwhelming, but it was steady, like a quiet truth that refused to fade. He spent the rest of the day in the village, walking slowly through familiar paths. The same trees, the same open fields, the same quiet sounds surrounded him. But his thoughts were different now. He wasn't just thinking, he was observing. For the first time, he began to notice how often his mind returned to the past. It didn't need a reason. It didn't need a trigger. One small thought would appear, and suddenly he would be back in an old moment, reliving it as if it were happening again. A conversation from years ago, a mistake he wished he could undo, a situation where he felt judged or misunderstood. These thoughts came automatically, and until now, he had always followed them without question. But this time something changed. He paused. Instead of getting lost in the memory, he simply noticed it. He realized that the thought itself was not hurting him in that exact moment. It was his attention, his focus, his habit of holding onto it that gave it weight. The memory appeared like the glass in his grandfather's hand. And without realizing it, he had been holding onto it for years. That realization felt uncomfortable at first, because it meant something important. It meant that the weight he carried was not entirely outside his control. For a long time, Arjun had believed that his past was the reason for his restlessness, that those moments had shaped how he felt, and there was nothing he could do about it. But now he began to see a different truth. The past had happened once, but he had been reliving it again and again. He wasn't just remembering, he was holding. As this understanding grew, he tried something small. When a familiar thought returned, instead of following it, he simply watched it. He didn't push it away, he didn't fight it, he just allowed it to be there, without holding on to it. At first it felt strange, almost unnatural. His mind wanted to go back, to analyze, to replay. That had been his habit for years, but he stayed with a new approach, even if only for a few seconds, and something unexpected happened. The thought passed, not instantly, not dramatically, but quietly, just like a cloud moving across the sky. It didn't disappear because he forced it to. It faded because he didn't hold on to it. That small moment gave him a sense of control he had never felt before. Not control over life, not control over the past, but control over how long he carried it. As the day came to an end, Arjun sat outside the house again, watching the sky slowly change colors. The same place, the same stillness, but a very different mind. For the first time in a long time, there was a gap between his thoughts, a space where he could simply be. And in that space, he felt something new, lightness, not because his problems had disappeared, but because, for the first time, he was not holding on to all of them at once. He finally understood something simple yet powerful. Pain is a part of life, but suffering grows when you refuse to put it down. And in that quiet realization, Arjun took his first step toward freedom. Chapter 4. Learning to let go. The understanding Arjun gained in the village did not instantly change everything. When he returned to his usual routine, the same life was waiting for him. The same work, the same people, the same responsibilities. But this time, something inside him was different. He carried awareness. On the first morning back, the old patterns returned almost immediately. As he brushed his teeth, a familiar memory surfaced. A mistake from years ago. Without thinking, his mind began to replay it, just like it always had. But then he caught it. He paused. For the first time, he didn't get pulled in completely. He remembered the glass. He remembered the feeling in his arm. And quietly, he asked himself, "Am I holding this right now?" The answer was yes. So instead of continuing the loop, he did something new. He didn't fight the thought. He didn't try to erase it. He simply allowed it to be there without giving it more attention. It wasn't easy. His mind kept trying to return to it, to analyze, to relive. But each time, he gently brought himself back to the present moment. This became his practice. Throughout the day, he noticed how often his mind reached for old memories. Sometimes it was triggered by a conversation, sometimes by a feeling, and sometimes it came without any reason at all. Every time it happened, he repeated the same quiet process. Notice, pause, let go. At first, the change was small. The thoughts didn't disappear, and the habit didn't break overnight. But something important began to shift. The duration changed. What once stayed in his mind for hours now lasted for minutes. What once disturbed his entire day now passed more quickly. He began to feel small moments of relief, like brief breaks from a long-held tension. In the evenings, instead of replaying the past, he started focusing on simple, real experiences. A quiet walk, the sound of the wind, the feeling of sitting still without needing to escape. These moments were not extraordinary, but they were real, and for the first time, he was fully present in them. Slowly, his energy began to return. The constant exhaustion he had felt for years started to fade. His mind was not perfectly silent, but it was no longer overwhelming. There was space between thoughts, And in that space, he found calm. He also began to notice a deeper change. He became less reactive. When something went wrong, he didn't immediately connect it to his past. When someone said something harsh, he didn't carry it with him for the rest of the day. He still felt emotions, but he didn't hold on to them longer than necessary. That was the difference. Days turned into weeks, and this practice became part of him, not as a rule, not as a forced habit, but as a natural response. He learned that letting go is not a single decision. It is something you do again and again, in small moments throughout the day. There were still difficult days. There were times when old patterns returned strongly, when he got lost in his thoughts again. But even then, he no longer felt helpless, because now he knew the way back. All he had to do was notice and put it down. And with each small act of letting go, Arjun felt lighter, calmer, and more free than he had ever been before. Chapter 5, Freedom in Release, elaborated. Time did not stop for Arjun, and life did not suddenly become easy. The same responsibilities remained, the same challenges appeared, and unexpected difficulties still found their way into his days. But something important had changed. He was no longer carrying everything with him. Weeks passed, and the practice of letting go slowly became a part of who he was. It wasn't something he had to remind himself of constantly anymore. It began to happen naturally, almost quietly, like a habit that had replaced an old one. There were still moments when his mind drifted back to the past. Old memories still appeared, just as they always had, but now they didn't stay as long. They didn't take over his entire day. They came, they were noticed, and then they passed. And in that simple shift, Arjun found something he had been missing for years. Space. Space to think clearly. Space to feel without being overwhelmed. Space to experience the present without being pulled back into the past. One evening, after a long day, Arjun sat alone by his window. The city outside was alive with movement, but inside there was stillness. Not the heavy silence he once feared, but a calm, steady quiet. He looked at his hands, remembering the day he held the glass. He could almost feel the weight again, the strain, the relief when he finally put it down. That memory no longer felt painful. It felt meaningful. For the first time, he understood something deeply. Life will always give you things to carry. Expectations, mistakes, disappointments, but it does not ask you to carry them forever. That choice is yours. He realized that his peace had never been far away. It had always been there, hidden beneath the weight he refused to release. Nothing outside him had changed dramatically. His job was the same. His routine was familiar. The world around him continued as it always had. But inside, everything felt lighter. He could sit quietly without being disturbed by his thoughts. He could face challenges without bringing the past into them. He could experience moments fully, without distraction. This was not perfection. This was freedom, a quiet, steady freedom that came not from controlling life, but from choosing what to hold and what to release. As the night deepened, Arjun leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment. There was no rush, no noise in his mind, no need to escape, just presence. He smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because he finally felt at peace with himself. He had learned something most people spend years searching for. Peace does not come from changing your life. It comes from changing how you carry it. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not to hold on tighter, but to finally let go. Right now, think about what you've been holding on to. A mistake, a memory, a moment that still hurts. Ask yourself honestly, how long have you been carrying it? Because the truth is simple but hard to accept. It's not the weight that's breaking you. It's how long you've been holding it. You don't need permission to let go. You don't need the past to change. You don't need everything to be perfect. You just need one decision, to put it down, not tomorrow, not someday, right now. Take a deep breath and choose to release even one thing that's been weighing on you. That one small act can give you a freedom you've been searching for years. If this story made you think, don't scroll away. Pause and comment one thing you're ready to let go of. Because healing doesn't begin when life changes. It begins when you decide to stop carrying what no longer serves you. Your peace is not somewhere in the future. It's waiting, the moment you let go.